All right, on this Friday's show, it's going to sound wonky at the beginning because after my introduction, you're going to hear me talking right now because the first 15 or so minutes was somehow wonky. And when I say that, electronically, something happened. We cannot figure it out. But the rest of the conversation with my buddy Dave Feldman was so great. I didn't want to lose it, so I will be putting that up. So if it sounds like a wonky beginning, that's why. Okay, hopefully you will enjoy this show. Thanks. My testosterone has been in the tank for years, ever since cancer. And I've never considered, sometimes I'll go in, my total testosterone is not even 250. There are 90-year-old men out there that have higher testosterone than me. Somehow I can still get it up, no problem, have sex.
Yeah, is it affecting your performance in any regard on anything?
I still put muscle on. I still work out every day. It doesn't, and I've heard other men say, dude, you don't understand. I was about to commit suicide. I'm not sure that people, it's always that easy way out. I'm sure
I do have an opinion on this.
Go on.
As far as association of levels, particularly of hormone levels, I tend to approach this with caution because what you see in a snapshot in the bloodstream is what is in transit, but not typically what is in use.
Right.
So you cannot assume, although it often is assumed, but you cannot assume what the amount is that's the standing level picked up in a blood test is indicative of a static amount of what's coming into the bloodstream and a static amount of what's going out. In other words, let's use glucose. This is a very easy example.
Sure.
Okay. Athletes are consuming, a lot of modern day athletes who are on a mixed diet are consuming a lot of glucose. So do we expect to find a lot of glucose in their bloodstream? We do not. Does that mean we think there's less glucose coming into their bloodstream if they're testing it like a glucose level of 70 or 80 fasting? No, you and I both know it's because they're absolutely repleting glycogen stores and they're using it. They're oxidizing. The oxidative tissues are making a lot of use of it, particularly the skeletal muscle. Okay, by the same token, how confident can we be that standing hormone levels are not achieving their signaling basis, which is the whole purpose, right? This is the value of doing it. Well, that's where you do go to. How do you feel? Are you having trouble putting on muscle? Are you having trouble with your sex drive? And if you're not, why should I conclude immediately that it's of detriment unless there are specifically studies on folks like yourself, Vinny, who do find that you're not experiencing the symptoms, but you have these standing levels until there are specifically studies on that? I have a difficult time coming to that conclusion that the number is more relevant than what the actual achievement level is that you're experiencing.
My general practitioner came up with almost the same exact reasoning as you. I said, well, wait a minute. I'm in the tank and I have guys that call me all day long because I do these consults and they'll say, I'm thinking about TRT. I can't get an erection. I hear more about erections on a daily basis than anyone. I can't get an erection. I'm tired when I get home. I don't want to go work out. There's no motivation. Half the time I feel like I want to kill myself. I'm falling asleep in the car, all these different things. Right. And I go to my doctor, Debbie, and I say, Debbie, why is it the highest I've been in any recent time was like 325. I was like, whoa. She said, because you're using all of you have free testosterone, right? It's not the total number, it's the free testosterone. And apparently your body has figured out how to use it, right? You're putting on muscle. You can stay strong in a gym. You can row a boat. You can ride a bike. You can do all of this stuff. You can climb a mountain, no problem. And you can have sex and you never have trouble getting it up. Some guys have that problem. My question becomes, if they got into better shape, would they too have more free testosterone? Or would they be using that lower level better? And I've always wondered that, but there's never been a study on that. Not that I know of. Tim Noakes hasn't done it. I don't know who else would do it. There's no university studying it. There's no money in it. There's money in handing out a drug.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of excitement level that comes from any intervention that changes the number that's in the bloodstream. So you're exactly right. If anything, the winds would blow in the opposite direction. Why would we want to confirm folks with low standing levels of testosterone would be just as performant as those folks that are at higher levels if it turns out there's a genetic factor to this, or maybe it's something with the diet that you're in. I mean, there's only money to lose for folks in studying that further. And that's definitely something I'm acutely aware can be a challenge in getting further research done.
Oh, look, we both live in that world. I lived in that world just trying to get TV shows on the air in Hollywood. It's like, yeah, we'd love to get kids in shape. What do you propose? Got to get them off of sugars and grains. Okay, bye-bye. We can't tell Coca-Cola. We can't tell Kellogg. We can't tell Post. We can't tell Procter & Gamble to go bye-bye because that's what they sell, right? I spent 30 years fighting that. That's people go, how did you get into this like that? I was in a fight. Let me do a quick ad, and I don't want to keep you forever, Dave. I know you've had a long day. You had to drive all the way back home, and I appreciate you coming on late like this. But I'm going to do a quick ad, and I want to do a little discussion about what we were here to discuss, if you don't mind. Folks, Villa Capelli. Villa Capelli Olive Oil is the longest running sponsor of this show. Villa Capelli has been here since almost the beginning. Anna Vicino spent time over at the Villa in Puglia, and she started drinking the olive oil and figuring out. We came back, we read the book Extra Virginity, we figured out the UC Davis olive oil study, and we realized that as Americans, we were being duped. And this is something I had been saying for years. Every time I went to Italy, because, I'm Italian, and you go there and you go, am I being romanticized by the fact that I'm here and the olive oil tastes better? Am I just being romanticized? As it turns out, I wasn't. Well, maybe I was being romanticized, but it wasn't over olive oil. I can tell you that, because in this country, we can legally cut olive oil up to 40% and still call it 100% pure olive oil. Think about it. You could go to every single grocery store in this country and you'll find Bartoli. Think about that. There's not that many olive trees. So they got to be cutting it with something. They're cutting it with seed oils, the stuff that's killing you. So you want to stay away from that. If you want to get the best olive oil on the planet, Villa Capelli. When you go there, go to villacapelli.com. Promo code Vinny will get you 10% off every single time. Promo code Vinny, Villa Capelli olive oil. Go there, let them know we sent you. If you spend over $125 after the Vinny discount, which if you do the math, you're going to spend about $145. After the Vinny discount, you'll be above $125. You get free shipping. And if you're ordering 3 liters of olive oil, that's like 1,000,000 pounds. That's a lot of shipping costs you can save. So there's 2 ways to save at Villa Capelli. Go do that right now. We're talking to my good friend, Dave Feldman. Dave, you want to go look at some of the stuff Dave has talked about. People that call me about cholesterol and everything else, you want to go, Dave, where can they find your cholesterol work?
Well, of course, there's the site that started all, which was cholesterolcode.com. But I'll be upfront in that I don't post to it as often as I used to, because we're now literally publishing more. So more papers are actually coming out around this research. That's the irony of my, I guess you could say, origin story, is I'm not at all a formally trained researcher, but I'm now partnering with a lot of PhDs and MDs to publish this. And so really the 2 places other than Cholesterol Code are citizensciencefoundation.org, which is our public charity, which is sponsoring this research, and now Own Your Labs. I'm putting a lot into this platform, which allows for people to do public blood or private blood testing with the incentive that they can contribute their anonymized data to the Citizen Science data pool, which we're going to be making available for research as well. So
good. Folks, this man is doing a lot of good work. Go support what he's doing. I'm a fan. You should be a fan too. Now we're going to get into something completely different. So I noticed on my Twitter about 48 hours ago, all of a sudden someone got a message to me from someone. Now, the reason I'm saying so, I'm not going to give out any names because these trolls want their names mentioned. So I'm not mentioning troll names. And Dave, I would appreciate it. Well, you wouldn't do it either because you know that. This troll said, hey, you need to unblock this guy and have a conversation with him. He's a vegan. And I don't block all vegans. As a matter of fact, I never block vegans unless they get into ad hominem and start just calling me every name in the book just for being alive. And I'll block them. Once they're blocked, they're never unblocked. Because if you let them back in, they're going to do the same thing again. So everyone said, all these vegans, he got all of his vegan friends to write to me and go, hey, why don't you talk to this guy? You said you can't get any vegans to debate you. Debate this guy. And I said, well, as you guys saw in the movie, because they watched Beyond Impossible, I invited all the top vegan doctors, MDs, not PhDs, just MDs. I invited them all to be in the movie, and they all turned me down. Those same guys have been invited to debate me on my podcast, and they turned me down for that too. They have an open invitation, but the first question they have to answer is, if you're a vegan and we did not have exogenous vitamins, how does a vegan get B12, which is an essential vitamin, meaning if you don't take it, your body won't make it. You put yourself at jeopardy to die. Okay. Nothing else. You got to answer that question. If you can satisfy that answer, we can move on to whatever you want to talk about. And because they can't answer that question, because you can't be a vegan until we figured out the 13 essential vitamins, they can't answer that. So they won't come on. They know the first question I'm going to ask. They won't do it. But this guy says, oh, this guy he'll answer it. He'll do the whole thing. And then Dave wrote to me privately and said, don't talk to that guy. It's like, don't. And I wrote back and said, don't worry, Dave. How did it go, Dave? How did
I mean, to contextualize, I myself, it was a bit more of a complex response that I gave you privately, but basically the gist of it is this: I myself have two standing rules. I didn't used to have these two standing rules. Rule number one, you already mentioned, and hominins. Basically, just if you're somebody who engages in a lot of personal attacks and you're not focused on the research and the reasoning, like it's got to, if you feel like you've got to have a lot of ridicule and it's getting personal, then it's just at a level that I think we shouldn't reward. We should be rewarding good decorum. We should be rewarding good back and forth discussion that stays centered on the reasoning and the logic and the research and the data, right?
Right.
The second one is a little more nuanced, but it's very important, which is whether or not it's productive in that you are both steelmanning each other. Steelman is the argument where you're trying to actually represent the best version of what the person is trying to tell you, so that you stay again, it keeps elevating the conversation and things progress. If the other person goes the other direction and they're strawmanning manning your position or they're misrepresenting your position, if they're saying so-and-so thinks this, Vinny's saying this, and it's clearly something just, hyperbolic, something you've never said, and seems to be presented in such a way as to entice you to correct them, then this kind of gets into something I sort of talked to you about briefly, which I call the Bailey trap. There's a kind of fallacy known as a Motte and Bailey. And just briefly stated, it's the fallacy where something is asserted as an argument that's very easy to take down and attack. That's the Bailey. And as you attack it, immediately the response is substituted. The assertion, the actual argument is substituted for something that's the Motte, something more defensible. And it can happen in real time. And the problem is that in social media today, this is more prevalent when a smaller account is trying to get a lot more attention from a bigger account. They'll just make more and more hyperbolic, very easily knockdownable statements that eventually the bigger account just gets really infuriated and wants to knock it down. And then immediately they engage in the Motte. They make other statements without missing a beat, pretending they'd never said the first one, or saying something that sounds very similar. And now it's fine because they've gotten the dialogue going. And right. when it turns out that they have a lot more time than you do, which is almost always the case, then they correctly state, hey, no, I got into a discussion with so-and-so, and they had to bail. They couldn't handle, the argumentation and upholding their position. And the reason it works, Vinny, is because the internet is a transcript. Nobody's going all the way back to the beginning right. with that demonstrably false statement. And that's known. So unless the source that is engaging with you cares a lot about its own credibility, such that it legitimately feels embarrassed by making statements that are demonstrably false and, wants to back off of these things, then there's already a problem. And right. you can usually kind of get this by looking at their history. And if their history doesn't show that they, that they themselves feel bad whenever they misrepresent and that they course correct and so forth, well, then they're not necessarily as worth engaging with.
And these vegan trolls, they do exactly what you just said. I've had them come in. They'll say something to me, and I'll go, "Well, you're a fucking asshole." And then they'll go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Why are you calling me an asshole?" It's like, because you're an asshole. You just told someone who lost 80 pounds that you're still fat. You're being an asshole. I'm defending that person. Now I'm the bad guy because I called you an asshole, according to you, right? And then they'll go with that. They'll go herd puppy on that, right? It's the exact, Bailey Motte thing that you're talking about. It's just classic that they do it. And of course, he's got all of his guys with 12 followers and 9 followers going, "Come on, man, why don't you debate him? Were you scared? Were you scared?" But of course, I don't answer those guys, which makes them more infuriated. But it's out there. And it needs to be talked about because we're trying to do good and help people with social media by contacting these people socially. And you got these motherfuckers just coming in and screwing everything up. That's where
now to be fair, because we already kind of agreed with this before, I'm sure you'll agree with me now. This is across the spectrum. It's not just with vegans. There's carnivore trolling.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of people on all sides that do this. This behavior is widespread. It's just the social media, norm. But
yeah.
It is also true that I do think it's so worth it to just stop inviting those folks to the table who don't seem to genuinely want to maintain decorum in their existence on social media to help advance these conversations. Because I'm sure you agree with me, a big part of this problem is that we're just not having productive dialogue. And that's why, like, I'm proud of the one debate I was able to get moderated between Dr. Tro and Lane Norton. I don't know if you ended up seeing that, but it took us a while to get it together, and it actually went great. And those two definitely are on very different pages.
Sure.
But I thought it was a fantastic debate, and I even threw out the invitation for others who might be interested in doing that, who are from different sides as well, so long as they follow a common structure like that. But we have too little of that. We have a lot more shouting from across the aisle, and it's a problem.
But even if you have Tro and Lane doing that, each side's going to think their guy won, right? And no one looks at the debate for what it is. Did you feel that way? I never saw it. I'm asking you.
No, I definitely talked to some folks who, and for what it's worth, I'm going to give credit to each. Some folks who were starting out a little bit more on Tro's side kind of moved a lot more to Lane's side, and vice versa. And that was something that was very exciting to me, because that to me meant that the debate itself was successful to the extent that it didn't feel exactly like what I was describing before, where there's just talking points sent in one direction or the other. It's got to be something where each side is engaging enough, but still in a productive way. So it's not just an interruption fest. That's one of the downsides, is a lot of times you get on, it's like cable news, but on the internet, it needs to be something where both sides really have to think through a lot of what they need to bring to the table and understand what's going to get debated well. And then I think it can be very productive.
Yeah. It's a ridiculous thing. That's why I try not, early on I did, and it was with a friend of mine, Rich Roll, who's a vegan. And Rich said to me, people wanted to hear, it was me and Rich, and I want to say it was Ben Greenfield. We did a 3-way thing, and we did it online. I don't know where it lives anymore or whatever, but Rich called me right before we went live, and he goes, "Hey man," because Rich is the nicest guy in the world. He goes, "Look, I'm just a vegan. I don't really understand how any of this works. I just don't hammer me." And I was like, "I'm not gonna, you're my buddy, man. We ride bikes together. I'm not going to hammer you." Right. Yeah. It's like, I'm not really even sure what we were doing there or who we were trying to help, because everyone stated their points and we all went, "Okay, see you later." It's just,
isn't it funny though? Isn't it funny though that he probably felt like stating that because of how common this problem is.
Yeah.
That even with the two of you knowing each other, even the two of you having that rapport, he's feeling the weight of what, and I think the same thing, by the way. Anytime I've seen a clip of him or anything, it's extremely engaging, because I likewise think he's really nice. I've never seen him say anything hyperbolic or
Super
anything
smart
along
guy.
those lines.
He's very
Yeah.
measured, really smart. Yeah.
Yeah, but the fact that you both already had a personal rapport, but that there was a fear, I don't know. It makes me wonder if there wasn't, I certainly get this whenever I'm about to get on with somebody else who I know who's kind of, more on the pro LDL lowering side and so forth. I'll often get a lot of chatter in like the DM groups and so forth. They're like, oh, stick it to him. Let's get him something. And I'm like, guys, it's not my brand. It's not what I'm interested. But I'll get likewise a bunch of people that are like, you're about to get ambushed. You're about to, and they'll call up prior, podcasts where things like that seem to be taking place. But again, at the end of the day, I'm still pro dialogue. I'm still pro moving the needle and seeing where we can get it next. I'm hoping the study will help with that. We'll hopefully have some data on hand soon that we'll probably get a lot of discussion in that regard. And again, I hope it's productive. We'll see.
Poor naive Dave. Oh my God. Oh, Dave. Oh, Dave. I'm getting ready to get a whole new group mad at me when they see my next documentary. Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm doing next, right? I think we talked.
I actually don't. Do you want to tease it?
I'm not
What
talking about it yet. I'm not talking. I'll tell you off the
Okay.
air. But I'm going to get
by the way, I haven't seen your current one, so I don't even know what your current. This is the impossible
basically
one or something.
It doesn't go after vegans, but vegans are butthurt over it because I took their hamburger away. I'm sorry, but the whole idea was, I own a food company. Beyond I owned NSNG Foods. We talked about it as an ad. And I make this product. It's a low carb, high fat product, lots of protein, and it does really well. Well, every year we go to these big giant food fairs, right, where all the health foods are all under this big top. It's bigger than any car show you've ever met. It takes up every building in these convention centers when you go, right? It's miles of product. And the last time I was there, I was like, my God, Beyond Burger, Possible Meat, everything was reimagined. Chicken reimagined. Ice cream reimagined. Everything is made out of chemicals. Everything is reimagined. Chicken nuggets reimagined. Nothing is real anymore. And this is the direction we're going in. So I took the biggest companies. I took Beyond Meat, Possible Burgers, and I just broke it down to see what was in them. I was like, okay, it's full of chemicals, full of crap. And then I just did a deeper dive and said, okay, they're saying it's saving the planet, but most of the raw materials are coming from China. And once you spew a lot of CO2 carbons in the air to make those nutrients, not nutrients, but chemicals, I misspoke, not nutrients, then you have to somehow get them to the United States. So that's going to either take Jet A fuel or diesel power or something, right? You got to get it here. And then we have to send more CO2 carbons into the air because we have to make it here, right? And then we have to get it on the shelf. It's a lot of steps and a lot of CO2. And I'm looking at this all along the way. And I'm talking to people like Mitt Lerner and Frederick Lacroix, and I'm talking to all these people and I go, oh yeah, it's 20 times and 30 times the amount that a cow fart would ever do. And I'm listening to all this and I'm adding all this up and I went, really? Really? It was easy to do the documentary. I didn't have to, there's no hyperbole. It's just, here it is. Here's what you're getting. You're getting the nutrition of an Oreo cookie or less, and it's costing this to the environment. And we're still going after cow belches. It just makes no sense. So, I just put the truth out there. They don't want the truth. And by the way, they think that the only animals that might die, maybe a rabbit, maybe a rat or something might get caught in a combine. I had actual farmers that sent me video. They go out with night goggles, same stuff that you use in the Army, all the, the infrared stuff. They're shooting deer, they're shooting hogs, they're shooting everything to keep the crops from being eaten. Thousands of pounds of meat per night, just killed and thrown away. Animals. They're killing them at night. But the vegans don't want to hear about it, right? I wasn't doing this movie anti-vegan. I was just going, look, if you're eating an Impossible Burger because you think you're saving Bambi, think again, because that's not happening. One farmer in Arkansas told me every day they take 2 10-gallon buckets of frog parts out of the grain. They're just sucking these frogs up. And some of those frogs end up in the grain, right? That ends
Yeah, I
up.
think there's actually FDA. I think there's actually FDA regulations on parts per certain amount that can be in there. It's fascinating because the one thing that and this isn't necessarily making a value judgment on the pro or con on that end, but my family on my dad's side is in farmer country, we'll just say. And I remember one of my earliest memories of my grandparents on my dad's side, they were arguing over whether to have cattle or to do another cycle of wheat on the land that they had. And at the time, my dad's dad, my grandfather, was arguing for the cattle because he was talking about durability. And I didn't understand at that time what it was until a bit later. I remembered to ask him about it at one point when he was showing me when I was like 13, 14. And what he was explaining was part of the problem with crops, and maybe it was just with wheat or the crops that he was growing, is that there's greater risk of variability with weather and thus spoilage. And that was something that was better mitigated with specifically cattle. I don't know if this is with all livestock, but just that they can endure lots of climate changes, like local climate changes with like the weather and all sorts of other things. There's less delicate aspects of it.
Right.
And I remember just thinking that was fascinating at the time, but not really like delving into it much beyond that. And again, we've covered a couple of things that are not my wheelhouse. This also is not so much my wheelhouse,
right?
But the systems engineer in me is kind of curious about things like that. Like, do they, when they determine these environmental impacts, determine spoilage on a per food item quantity? And sort of something you were alluding to before, I'm also interested in the shipping combinability. That's another aspect to food manufacture, is that there's shipping. When you're shipping a single object, you may still have other additives that you apply and so forth, depending on the nature of where it's getting refined and how. But when something like combines multiple ingredients, that can often have many additional stops associated with it, which I would be interested in what the carbon footprint is. The more something is complex and at what stages it requires transport, because I don't know. I don't know how much that gets factored into the overall carbon impact.
But it all gets factored in, but no one wants to talk about it, right? We have politicians that go out and say, oh yeah, we need to do meatless Mondays in New York because it's better for the environment. Well, that's just a grand statement. That doesn't mean anything, right? You hear the same thing in California, go on.
There's already a huge, I think nobody disagrees that locally sourced food is much less of an environmental impact than something that's traveling in, intercontinental travel of food. I think that's not controversial, right?
Right, but the controversy comes in. Dave, you might be too young to remember this, but when I was a kid, everything was a season. Period. You got oranges in a season. I know this is hard to believe now. In 2023, you could go in the dead of winter anywhere in this country and get any fruit you want, and it tastes great because it's being.
And it was smaller, and it was more fibrous.
It was, but you get oranges. There was a peach season, especially in the South. They all came out of Georgia. There was a Vidalia onion season. There was a season when you could get pineapples and this and that. And it was a season, strawberries, midsummer, strawberries and watermelons. There was a season for it. You understand? And when that season was over with, the grocery stores didn't even have it because it wasn't grown, because it came from an area that was within a few states of where you were, right? If you lived up in the Northeast, you were going to get much better apples than you were going to get anywhere else, bottom line. If you lived in California or near Florida, in those states around that, you were going to get much better. You were going to either get Valencia oranges or you were going to get navels from here. The Vidalia onions came out of wherever, Mackinac peaches came out of wherever. Now you get all of that year round. Where does it come from? It comes from Chile. It comes from everywhere. It comes from every corner of the world because we figured out how to pick it and retard it with refrigeration and then ship it. Think of the refrigeration that has to go on in mobile and transport. That's all got to be refrigerated, right? And you want to ask me what the impact is on the environment? We could do the math without even looking at it. It ain't good. And we have people going, hey, we got all the vegetables, all the fruit in the world. We could just, yeah, you're causing a bigger impact, a bigger footprint by doing that versus eating local the way we used to. We need to get back to the Amish. We need to all become Amish. And I'm not being funny here.
No, but it would be it's fascinating because I have these moments like this where like the rabbit hole chasing me would love to just I wish that I had like a month off and see if I could find people like I mean it's interesting the agronomists that you and I both know. It's always fascinating because I'll only get a snippet of what they're talking about with like soil health.
Yeah.
And I'm embarrassed that I did not know nearly enough from, again, having grandparents who literally were living and dying by that. And they would talk about the health of the soil when I was a kid. And I didn't get that at all because I was like, it's just dirt. I don't understand. And now I, I've gotten a bit older, understanding what the issues are with monocropping and with the mineral depletion and all of these different things. I mean, it's such a huge deal. But yes, if you're just talking aggregate carbon overall, of course, I don't know. Is there anybody who argues against like locally sourced foods as being clearly a smaller carbon footprint, relatively speaking?
Well,
again,
let me answer that. I don't mean to butt in. The answer is
no.
yes and no at the same time. You would think that they're not. You would think that they would all say locally sourced, locally grown. But when you have politicians, and I saw this in the last election cycle, because I don't like politics, but I listen to what they say. And, we had Cory Booker, who's a, devout vegan, fine, who said, yeah, we're going to have meatless Mondays. We're going to have no meat on Fridays. We're going to do all this stuff. We're going to make the schools this and that and the whole thing. And we're going to clean up the environment by not eating meat. Okay, that's a false statement, number one, because in order to do that year round, you have to bring foods in from around the world. So you're causing a bigger carbon footprint. But you see, people hear, it's like what you and I were talking about 20 minutes ago. We hear the sound bites and go, oh, well, yeah, I'm for saving the environment. And Cory Booker wants to save the environment, but he doesn't really want to. He just wants everyone to eat a vegan diet. In order to do that, you would have to get food from around the globe, shipped around, refrigerated, number one. And then I'll never forget this. I put it in my movie. It's in my third movie. I have a clip of Kamala Harris where one of the talking heads on the news said, well, Cory Booker thinks we should be vegans. What do you think? She goes, yeah, I think eating less meat would be good. She's one heartbeat away from being the leader of the free world now. And this is what this woman was talking about in a campaign speech, right? Love her or hate her, that's what she said. I'm not putting those words in her mouth. I have it on film. Her exact words. Now, will she honor that? Absolutely not. I'm not so disingenuous that I would go, oh, first thing she would do if she became the leader of the free world is turn everything vegan. She's not going to do that because, in fact, she doesn't care about that. She just wanted to be elected, right? So, but we have that conversation going on amongst politicians. And what do politicians do? They influence policy, and then we follow those policies. And that's the direction we're heading in. And I don't think it's a good direction.
Well, I guess this is obviously I can't speak as much on the environmental side, but I'll leave it on an interesting note in that at least we'll have some, I hope, really awesome new data on the health side. Because, with my study, not that I'm trying to bring it back and inject it per se, but as you know, we're going to have a whole bunch of people as participants in our study. Probably, I can't say I know for sure because I'm blinded. I just know a lot of lean mass hyperresponders are often on exactly the opposite diet of, what is typically predominantly plant-based. They're predominantly meat-based, and some of them are straight up carnivore. So if it is truly detrimental, if it's truly pathogenic, especially if it's atherogenic, which is to say that they're going to be presenting with and developing rapid plaque progression, we'll have that kind of data. Up until this point in time, a lot of this has been, particularly when it comes to things like red meat, has been epidemiology. And we've just not really had prospective studies on folks who are more health conscious, but yet on a red meat predominant diet. which I'm excited that we're going to actually have as kind of a side effect, even though we're mainly focusing on people who are extremely low carb and with high LDL. Again, they generally have, these diets are typically high in red meat and high in animal protein and high in saturated fat and low in fiber. So we'll see. We'll have a food recall also. So we'll actually get at least a gist of what their diets tend to be like.
And just like because of the study, you're blinded to it also. So you don't really know what the results are, or you don't know anything about the results.
Well, I know I have some preliminary data that I have presented on, but I haven't been too loud about it, I guess you could say, because a lot of it has been for the purpose of giving kind of an update to, as you know, this was a crowdsourced study. So I went to the community, asked them to help me raise the money to do it. And at a certain point in time, we needed to get more participation. We needed to get more money. And it was about that time that typically preliminary data is released anyway. And so that ended up happening last year. And that did look encouraging. That was a snapshot, a 1 year snapshot with 64 participants. They did have lower they had lower levels of plaque than what would have been expected, given the extraordinarily high levels of LDL that they had. But again, I emphasized then, I'll emphasize now, it was preliminary. And I didn't actually discuss it that much or like relink the video that did it that much, because I'm more anxious to get to the full preliminary results, which should be coming soon. That's after all 100 of our participants have gotten scanned. Again, if you're going by the existing lipid hypothesis, they should have extremely high levels of standing plaque, because it's about 4.4 years in, they will have been almost half a decade in the top, I think it's 0.1%, right?
Yeah.
So they're at the 99.9% of the population. And yeah, like I said, the eligibility was high LDL. We got lucky that there were so many people that were already at these levels for this long, and they're middle age. So at an average age of 55, there are folks who likely would have already had plaque, even if at a low risk level group. But getting it back to the diet, I'm speculating, but it's a comfortable speculation. Mostly in mass hyperresponders I know are on a meat predominant diet, and typically checking all the boxes you normally would be told to not check, that you should be avoiding red meat, that you should be avoiding animal protein, and so forth. So we'll see.
Well, I can't wait for it all to come out, and I'm sure you'll come back on when it does come out. Dave, tell people where they can go to find you one more time right here at the end.
Yeah, so of course, cholesterolcode.com, citizensciencefoundation.org is our public charity. You can also go to ownyourlabs.com, which is a private blood testing service, and help out Citizen Science if you opt in for a Citizen Science discount. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at Real Dave Feldman, as well as Instagram at Real Dave Feldman.
There you have it, folks. You know what to do with me. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com. Click through the banner. It puts coal on the fire, gets my train down the track. I'm able to keep this show free for a gazillion years in a row. We have a super fan page if you are so inclined. Also, go check out the NSNG ebook. We've had tens of thousands of people lose millions of pounds, something like that. Millions of pounds. Look, if this show has done nothing else, we've gotten people to lose millions of pounds. So go do that. Go check it out. NSNG ebook. If you want to yell at me, go to Twitter or Instagram and tell me I'm the biggest a-hole in the world. I would appreciate it. On behalf of Dave Feldman, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.